Ladies and gentlemen, 2016 BMW M235i. The question we have today is, should you get this for around $25,000 to $30,000 or the M2 of the same generation for about $10,000 more, $35,000 to $40,000. Now the BMW M2 is in a separate video, link in the description. Make sure you watch that as well to get the full story. But right off the bat, much more pedestrian, much more civilized. You don't have the angry arches, the wide bodiness of the M2, that extra aggressiveness. This seems very normal. It seems civilized. It seems like it's gonna behave itself. But let's see about that. Let's see if we can get her to misbehave at least a little bit. This specific example is paired with the ZF Auto 8-speed, a transmission that BMW is very familiar with and is tuned quite nicely with their engines. This is the same N55 engine that you're gonna find in the M2, but in the M2 it's tuned to make more. It's tuned to make around 365 horsepower there. Over here, we're at 320 horsepower, 330 pound-feet of torque. But it's the same, straight six engine, turbocharged with a twin scroll. Crazy weather in the Bay Area recently, so we're not gonna go too hooligan, although we are in sport mode, which changes the throttle response. Let's put this into manual. There we go. This generation of BMW engines feels turbocharged. You have a little bit more noticeable lag than the more recent, the B58, which replaced this N55. Now this car is bone stock. Whew, all right. We're on Michelin Pilot 4S tires, which handle suboptimal conditions decently well, actually. Compared to the M2, the M235i weighs around 50 to 100 pounds more. So when you look at this car, you think, hey, I love the old generation BMWs, the E36, the E46. I want a light, small, compact 3 Series kind of proportioned vehicle, FR, coupe, and you'd be mistaken because these are not light. This car weighs around 3,500 pounds. So while it is nice and small and compact, I would not call it light. Much heavier than it looks, in fact. It's about 50 to 100 pounds heavier than the M2 of the same generation. Now, as you'd expect, this car very much feels between a base 2 Series, which I've driven, same generation, and the M2. In just about every way. The power delivery. This doesn't quite have that same level of acceleration as the M2, obviously. But driving feel and driving dynamics as well. This is definitely a softer sprung, more relaxed vehicle to drive, and all the inputs feel that way as well. The brakes are a little bit squishy, they don't have much initial bite. You can tell this car is more for dailying rather than canyon carving, and definitely not track work. Steering is light. Turn-in is not as sharp or as immediate as I would like. It feels a little sporty, but there's definitely a bit of a lag from the steering input to the car actually changing directions and obeying your command. You can get this to wiggle with throttle on corner exit, but it's not as playful as that M2. Now this car also does not have an LSD, so when you are trying to rotate it with throttle, it's not as intuitive, not as dialed in. For a decently crap road in terms of the surface, it feels comfortable, it feels good. ultimately you have to remember that these cars, they're not dedicated sports cars. They are tarted up 2 Series. This one is only semi-tarted. If you want the full Tartmobile, you go with the M2, of course. And as a result, you are making compromises. But there's benefits to that too, right? Like, you do have 2 rear seats. Not very usable, but you can use them in a pinch. It's a comfortable car. The seating position is a little bit higher and more upright than what you would have in a sports car, so some people like that. Perhaps a little bit more comfortable. Ingress and egress. And that ZF Auto 8-speed, if you want a daily driver and you don't like rolling your own gears, the ZF Auto is essentially the gold standard when it comes to slush boxes. It's a traditional torque converter automatic transmission, but the shifts are so quick, so immediate, and they're very smooth. I do find this is a car that it's best suited for someone who wants a primarily daily driver vehicle that's on the smaller side, a little bit more nimble than some of the modern offerings. And they don't prioritize that razor edge sports car driving experience. They prioritize comfort, and they want a little bit of sportiness. That's really who this car is for. Time to let it rip. Yeah, I feel like if the car had just a bit more horsepower, it'd feel a little more balanced. Right now, a tad bit underpowered. So this car, it's essentially for the person who wants a primarily daily driver. You're not focused on canyon carving, you're not focused on really aggressive driving, but you want something a little bit sportier than a regular 2 Series. But you're also the person who doesn't prioritize things like steering feel. You want the automatic transmission because, you know, the comfortability and the ease of use. You want the upright seating position. You want a little bit of practicality. But if you're trying to find driver engagement and reward in that aspect, then honestly, you'd probably want to look elsewhere. The M2, for around $10,000 more, does give you a substantially different driving experience. If you haven't already watched that video on the BMW M2, then make sure you check that out, link in the description. But let me know, what do you guys think? Would you get this for 25 to 30K, or would you get that car for around 35 to 40K? Much love, my friends. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in that next one.